Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Public Safety Committee for February 29th, 2024. And first item of business is public comment. Is there anybody here who wishes to address the Public Safety Committee? Okay. I see one card. And Zach, I know you've been here before, so I won't read through all the rules.
Thank you very much. My name's Zach Wynn, and I live here in the community, here in Ithaca. I'm curious, is Sheriff Osborne in the meeting?
He is coming in via Zoom right now.
Oh, okay. Well,
if you'd like him to hear, why don't we give him a moment to get here if you think you'd like to have him hear your comment.
I had a specific question I wanted to ask him.
Okay. We'll give him a moment. In fact, I'm going to get some water. There he is. Okay.
Good afternoon. Hello, Sheriff Osborne. I couldn't help but notice a comment that you made yesterday on Facebook regarding the new report from the Community Justice Center, and I don't want to misconstrue your meaning, but I would appreciate if you could elaborate on your opinions that you expressed here. And in December, this body, Matt and I, raised the issue of coordinated shutdowns of traffic relating to protests on behalf of the Palestinian cause and the likelihood that this behavior will continue into this year's election cycle. And I forwarded video showing a previous incident not far from the legislature where a mob attempted to open the door of people who were trapped in their car, who then pushed through the roadblock. I would like to understand if there's a plan to manage or discourage these shutdowns of the road, or if people should just simply expect to deal with them occasionally as part of the culture here in Ithaca. There is a tremendous amount of popular support for these roadblocks, and that itself is kind of a problem. There's something called the tyranny of the majority, and if you get enough people to work together to take away the rights of others, that doesn't make it any less wrong. I believe that there are a lot of people who are being radicalized by the hyper-polarizing rhetoric going on around this issue. There was recently a gentleman named Aaron Bushnell who self-immolated on behalf of the Palestinian cause. This gentleman had a wife, children, a job. He was in the military. He had a future, and he traded that all away just for a moment of internet clout. And there are other people who are getting similarly radicalized. There's just a shooting down in a mega church in Texas where, Free Palestine was carved into the weapon. So these roadblocks are an explicitly political phenomena, and that the politics of the roadblocks are communism. They are organized by the Ithaca Communist Party USA, the Ithaca Democratic Socialists, who are explicitly a Marxist organization. So this does nothing but undermine the cause of the Palestinian people and, irrevocably almost make it a leftist cause. If this is about human life, ending suffering, there's a lot that could be done. But when the road is shut down and when people are being trapped, I believe kidnapped, in an act of terrorism, I don't think it does anything to benefit the community, the Palestinian people, or these activists themselves who are putting their lives in danger. So please at least do something to discourage this phenomena. Put out a press release, maybe. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we have one more card, Ty Lee.
I was thinking about this before I came, and I didn't get the card, wrestling with the fact that there's going to be a presentation. And what I wanted to address, but I didn't fill out the card was on the vote to cease fire. And it's heart-wrenching, it's heartbreaking. When we think about what's going on in our society, we're here talking about homelessness, getting people shelter, and we got people being bombed out of their homes, out of their hospitals, kids. And we didn't have the courage. You elected officials didn't have the courage to put life first. You chose not to put life first, so when things collapse around us, our globe is shrinking with our connection to each other. So when we make those decisions in this body, it impacts more than just here as a poor decision, because it's on the other side of the globe. So when it's not a global majority that's being hurt, it is a global majority that's being hurt. It's all of us. So these decisions that you guys make here cause those actions in these streets that this guy doesn't like. But when people gather in that large of a number, we can't ignore it and pass the buck. So I hope when this comes forward, and maybe my word doesn't mean anything, but when you guys are, whether it's life or it's death, because that's what the decision was, I hope next time you will choose life. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the committee? All right, seeing none, we'll keep going. Are there any changes to the agenda? I am not aware of any. And we have minutes from January 18th. Could I get a motion on the minutes? Veronica moves. Lee seconds. Any questions or comments on our minutes? Are we ready to vote? We have one. What is the rule? Shauna can vote?
Yes.
Okay. Shauna?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the minutes are passed. I'd move on to the chair's report. I have some things I'd like to talk about, but we have a short presentation from the Sunflower House update, and there's a report in the packet. I think, why don't we do that right now?
Rich, sorry, before we get started, resolution number 12229, we actually need to pull from the agenda.
Okay, this is the reappropriation of the Gun-Involved Violence Elimination GIVE grant from the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we'll consider that withdrawn. So there was a change to the agenda. There we go. There we go. All right, and welcome to our guests. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, and I'd say 10 minutes. Okay, if you're ready to go. I think you said you have a screen to share.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Paula Ioannide. I am a researcher who has been for the past 2 years working to assess the effectiveness of the Sunflower Houses program. I'm here with Charlie Willison, who is a professor at Cornell University who has partnered with me on the project. I'd also like to just acknowledge that there's a whole team that made this happen. Anna Cook is on the Zoom as our quantitative researcher, and Hannah Morris is here as our qualitative assistant researcher. And I also want to just acknowledge that all of this would not have been possible without the Ultimate Reentry Opportunity Initiative, which essentially petitioned the county to fund this project. So I also want to thank them as well as the legislature for enabling the research funds to evaluate this program. It is absolutely significant, and we are here to kind of report back on what your investment has yielded. And then I'd also just want to deeply acknowledge the organization that is that is running and operating the Sunflower Houses program, which is OAR. Executive Director Dave Sanders is here. He has a lot of ins and outs about the daily operations of what this program looks like. Importantly, the reason me and Charlie are in front of you rather than Tali and Dave as the directors of these two reentry organizations is that we really wanted this to be an independent report assessed and evaluated independently of the organizations so that there would be no bias, so that we would essentially rely on a independent evaluation. So I'm going to walk you through some of the highlights of our findings. I want to begin by just sort of giving an overview of what we'll talk about, which is essentially kind of what we began this program on the theory of change, what we thought was going to happen when we first proposed, when Sunflower Houses was first proposed as a concept and was funded through the county legislature on an over-target request 3-year pilot. And then we'll talk a little bit about the budgetary realities of what actually happened. And I think that will be very insightful moving forward. And then we'll largely report on some quantitative measures, many at the county level, presenting the context, the broader context in which the Sunflower Houses program is operating. And I'll just say that to my knowledge, we are the only researchers tracking and reporting on countywide measures, specifically on racial disparities and recidivism rates at the rebooking. So hopefully that will be of broader use to public safety interests beyond just the Sunflower Houses program. And then we're going to talk to you about the specific things that we've measured and assessed for the Sunflower Houses program. And we're going to kind of put that against some measures or some comparisons with the OAR broader clientele, right? Sunflower Houses participants are a subset of OAR clients, so we kind of want to distinguish between those clients who have very similar characteristics. They are formerly incarcerated, they tend to be homeless or housing insecure, they tend to have substance use disorders or mental health conditions, and the difference being that the Sunflower Houses provides affordable, safe, centrally located housing and wraparound services. So that's why we thought OAR clients would be a good comparative group. I'm going to also report to you at the end of 2024 on the qualitative measures. We are also interviewing Sunflower Houses participants as well as OAR clients who have similar houseless characteristics to give you the stories and testimonies and narratives. Unfortunately, we're not able to report on that right now because Cornell University took 14 months to give us permission on their IRB. So not just, sorry, Cornell. I don't know what happened at that level, but that's why we're completely behind on the qualitative aspects, much further behind than what we thought we would be. So I'll just go over, for those of you who do not know about the Sunflower Houses program, it is the first Housing First model in Tompkins County. And this is really significant because it is it's the first implemented Housing First model that has also been assessed. Most of the Housing First models that we know are effective in reducing homelessness, in reducing the structural barriers that our populations that we're interested in face have been assessed in big cities. And I want to just kind of champion the fact that Tompkins County is the only place doing this and funding this at the county level in a rural geographical location that's also a smaller municipality. And this is important because it's a different scale and model than big cities, but it sets a precedent for what could be replicated in counties like ours, in more rural, upstate, central, or western New York models. The other aspect that was really important to emphasize is that when the program was conceptualized, it was conceptualized as a restorative justice model. And the reason that's important is that historically, the majority of transitional housing programs for people coming back from jails and prisons are very punitive. In other words, they have things like curfews. And if you don't make the curfew, you're kicked out. They have drug tests. They have all kinds of barriers that essentially make it more and more difficult for people returning from jails and prisons to really kind of reacclimate to the community. So we took a different approach. Our approach was not that we wouldn't have any guidelines, because of course you don't want to put people who are on parole, on probation, court involved at risk. But we did fundamentally approach it by saying, you know what, we're gonna do customized, individualized needs, and we're gonna give you as many chances as we can to stick with the program and to assist you and to stay in the program. The other thing I'll just say is that because Ithaca's housing affordability is absolutely extremely difficult for this population, which is usually at zero income, usually homeless or housing insecure, that the central location of the Sunflower houses is absolutely key here for accessing other services as well as employment opportunities. And it's a big thanks to INHS, who had these units available and they were unrestricted, which is uncommon for them, and made them available to OAR specifically for this program. So all of those components are really essential. Let me go now to the budgetary considerations. You see on your screen sort of what we thought it would cost and what it actually cost to run this program. Very importantly, we grossly underestimated the funds that we would receive through Department of Social Services, what are called emergency total needs grants funding, which is essentially about $400 per person per room. It's kind of what people get if they're DSS eligible and let's say they're living in one of the apartments, you know, on Plain and State Street, right? It's that kind of subsidy that is available for certain folks. What ended up happening in reality is that the majority of Sunflower Houses participants were not eligible for this grant, which put OAR at a major deficit in terms of collecting rent. We were presuming $380 to $400 per person per month, and that ended up being almost entirely untrue because so many of the clients had DSS sanctions and other reasons why they couldn't get this stipend from DSS to feed into OAR's rental income, okay? The other huge cost was utilities. We underestimated how expensive having internet access, having, you know, heating and so on. As an example, the heating stipend for low-income units could not be obtained for Sunflower houses because it's 3-bedroom units, and to get that heating stipend, that subsidized heating stipend, you have to have a meter for each room, something that was not feasible for us to achieve, which put utilities, you know, or even the subsidies that might be available to offset utilities as a non-available subsidy, which then of course left those utilities costs as something that the clients couldn't pay and that OAR had to pay out of its own reserve. So in year one, 2022, you see that OAR was at very high risk of basically closing down this program due to budget deficits at close to you know, $93,989, and as a result had to dig very deeply into their reserves. Because they obtained a state grant from NYSHIP in year two, they were able to have a bit of a fewer loss. And then very thankfully, due to opioid settlement money that they were able to obtain in 2024, we anticipate that those subsidies, or rather those losses are much fewer for 2024. But very importantly, there is no permanent funding structure yet for Sunflower houses, in part because the county really only promised this on a 3-year pilot as an over-target request. And we'll talk about one of our recommendations with respect to that at the end, but just wanted to kind of give you this overview. So I'm going to pass it now to Charlie to go over some local incarceration trends, and we'll go through these pretty quickly, but we wanted to kind of set the context for the broader incarceration.
So to get started with the broader context, we're first, and this is data from the Sheriff's report, so thank you for providing this data. I'm just going to start with a big picture. So we have trends, this is from 2015 to 2023, local incarceration trends, but specifically the county jail census total count. And we see a decline over time for the first 5 years. Obviously, there are exogenous factors in 2020 that, this might not be a reliable estimate comparable to other years. But so what we really want to emphasize is that beginning in 2021, which was the year that the Sunflower Houses started, we do see annual jail census counts increasing, and over the last 3 years, they have increased by 60%. Moving on, so you see this next chart is the same year period, 2015 to 2023. The metric is a little bit different. This is Tompkins County Jail average daily census, so the average daily count. And this also, again, we do see a decline for the first 5 years, but again, notably, again, starting in 2021, because we want to kind of look past 2020, we do see that the average daily census counts have also increased since 2021, again, which is when the Sunflower Houses began, and we do see about a similar measure, close to 60% for this rate as well. I also, before I move on, sorry, really just want to say we do see for both of these charts, however, that the rates have not gone back up to 2015 levels. So now moving on to this next figure, this is racial disparities in the Tompkins County Jail over the same time period from 2015 to 2023. And if you'll notice, just at first glance, this chart overall is very different, and the temporality is increasing over time as opposed to the previous two, where we do see declines, even though we see increases in the last 3 years. And what I want to emphasize here is that in 2023, so the last number here, Black or African American people were over 8 times more likely than white people in Tompkins County to be incarcerated in the county jail. So continuing on with racial disparities in the Tompkins County Jail, this is really important. This is providing a proportionate measure, so not just looking at with the within jail comparison, but thinking about how the representation of persons who are incarcerated is comparable to the general population. And we see a very stark disparity here. So although people who are Black in Tompkins County make up just less than 5% of the county's population, this is in 2023, they are substantially overrepresented in jail, making up almost 1 in 3 people who are incarcerated in Tompkins County. So now we're going to turn to recidivism rates through rebooking. Again, same time period that we're talking about, 2015 to 2023. And again, we do see, similar to the first couple of charts that I was showing, a decline from 2015 measures. However, looking again at the past 3 years, again from the similar trend as the first 2 charts, but now this is rebooking as opposed to jail census, we do see that recidivism rates for unsentenced and committed people have increased over the last 3 years from 19.7% in 2021, again, which was when Sunflower Houses started, to now at just over 24% in 2023. So this next chart is just a little bit different. So the previous chart was committed and unsentenced. This one also includes RORs, released on own recognizance. And this is also a little bit different because it's not looking at an overtime metric. So this is not 2015 to 2023. This is an aggregate looking at trying to get a sense of what is the real rebooking trend in a period of time in Tompkins County. So what does this look like? So this is an aggregate measure over 2 years, 2021 to 2023, and we can we're doing this because you might have someone who gets rebooked in December and released in January. So this gives we think a more accurate depiction of the real recidivism rate and also across these 3 categories as well. And this is broken down by racial and ethnic categories, but what we want to emphasize here is that the rebooking recidivism rates across these categories for people booked 2 or more times in this aggregate 2-year period is over 1/3 of people who are incarcerated in Tompkins County.
Excuse me, you're saying 2 years? It looks like 3 if it's 21, 22, 23.
Yes, that is my mistake. Yes, that is 3 years. Thank you.
Okay.
Now I will turn it over to Paula to move forward with the sunflower houses specifically.
And we'll be happy to take questions at the end
Yeah, if
on
we could
any of this.
Keep going.
Yeah, because I know
we got a lot of stuff in the meeting.
Yeah.
So
I won't trouble you too much with the demographics of the sunflower clients, but I'll just emphasize that 34.1% of sunflower clients, program clients, are African American or Black. And that's important because of that racial disparity that you saw represented in the jail. We're trying to essentially mirror access on the basis of kind of that larger context. And also importantly, on the gender piece, the sunflower houses was established from the beginning to be inclusive, have one unit for women, as well as people who are LGBTQ identified or those identifying as transgender. So that was a framework that was inclusive from the beginning and has been manifesting in the demographics. The other thing I'll just say is that sunflower clients are some of the most high need and some of the folks in our county who have the highest health risks. They're as you can see from the data, they're all formerly incarcerated. 73.8 came into the program from homelessness or directly from jails or prisons, and that 98% of them are substance users and struggle with substance use disorders. And so you can see that one of the things we understood at the end of 2023 is that chronic illness, substance use, mental health conditions were one of the highest needs for these participants, and that the program needed to adjust to address these needs. Those also served as barriers for obtaining employment and sustaining employment, which proves to be a major challenge. My little diagram there is for you to just kind of see how all of these things overlap and also kind of dovetail against other systemic barriers. Importantly, though, despite those high needs and risks, the in-program rebooking recidivism rates, which means how many people while they were living in the program got arrested and rebooked into the jail, was at 7%. So quite low. Only 3 out of 42 participants experienced that. Post-program recidivism rate is higher at 28%. 9 out of 32 participants after they left the Sunflower Houses program got rebooked into the jail. So what that tells us is that long-term needs are needed and that having that program support is really key for reducing recidivism. Here, I won't trouble because of time, but we found we did a count of the use of services, so you can see what kind of services that OER provides Sunflower participants used. We also wanted to just kind of give you some key outcomes on housing, and very importantly, while no clients had permanent housing when they entered the program, 26% did when they left the program, and then while 73.8% were homeless, only 16.7% were homeless upon exiting the program, which is almost a 57% decrease in homelessness. And what that tells us as a housing first model is that the program is highly effective in reducing homelessness. Essentially, even for those clients who kind of didn't abide by the program rules or guidelines, OER does their best to find them temporary housing or some housing that is suitable to their needs. Some people, as you can see, go to rehabilitation programs, inpatient programs that have a residential component, and Sunflower Houses, OER will save their room for them if they want to go to that program and then return, which is a really important piece. And then we'll conclude by kind of doing a bit of a comparison with OER. Oh, that's still me, sorry. Real quick, this is kind of a comparison of who OAR clients are. You can look at this, but again, the total sample here that we looked at is over 1,100 clients. This kind of tells you the volume that OAR serves of people who even years after being incarcerated continue to make use of their reentry services. I'll say that when we calculated the rebooking recidivism rate for OAR clients, it was 17.5%. This is important because, and again, we can get into how we calculated this, but essentially, even for people who are getting these supports, you can see the recidivism rate. And then finally, we kind of want to give you a side-by-side comparison. These are kind of apples and oranges, so we don't encourage you to compare them because they have very different sample sizes, and also the calculations were done a bit differently. But I do think it's kind of a good visual to look at the recidivism rates for each of these different classes of people, and to kind of see, relative to their total sample, how many people are recidivating, what's the percentage that end up getting rebooked into the jail, suggesting that there's still a very high need to support people who are kind of cycling in and out of the local incarceration system. And we'll conclude by some recommendations and then take some questions.
So overall, we hope that we've shown you that this is, the Sunflower Houses is a program that is serving a really, really high need, complex population, but that has been very effective. And so our recommendations are to permanently fund OAR personnel and expenses in the amount of $170,000 per year to sustain this program permanently and sustain reducing rates of homelessness in Tompkins County. I will also emphasize that OAR has been involved with regional members to work on petitioning New York State Assembly members and senators to add $7.8 million in transitional housing funding to non-New York City regions. And we know that for people who are reentering, over 50% are reentering to non-New York City regions. And so this is just another way to help bolster these efforts and house people upon reentry. Now, of course, probably not surprising, Sunflower Houses is not sufficient to address homelessness, especially for people who are reentering into Tompkins County alone. So building more affordable housing units through a Housing First approach. We've shown here that it works. Housing First has also been tested across the globe over the past 40 years, and it's highly effective across all of these models. And then finally, another opportunity, and I'm happy to talk more about this if people have questions, is to petition New York State representatives to amend New York State Medicaid policies. And there are two ways to do this that are really relevant. One is to reduce the healthcare coverage gap for people who are reentering so that they are enrolled in Medicaid prior to reentry. And there's also another opportunity to get Medicaid to specifically fund housing and Housing First models. And these are both through 1115 waivers. So thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. And Dave and Tylee, would you like to come up for the discussion piece in case there's questions from the committee? If you like, you don't. Okay. Yeah, let's see. I'm sure we have questions. Lee, go ahead.
What's the average length of stay for a resident in the Sunflower House?
Dave will answer this, but it can range from 2 weeks to 12 months. But yeah, we can, I should have calculated the average length.
Yeah, Lee, I have it in a presentation somewhere. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think the longest we've ever had is a little over 1 year, and the shortest we had is 3 days.
In the houses, 4 3-unit houses, so you're dealing with 12 people at a time, ideally.
Correct.
And 57% when they leave have housing.
Permanent housing, and some go into temporary housing, yeah.
So in real numbers, how many individuals are we looking at that have moved from a homeless status into permanent housing at the end of the program? Would you say 7 out of 12? Is that probably what the average is?
If you look at the key outcomes, which should be in the report, 11 went to permanent housing, 10 people.
Packet page 29.
Oh, sorry, 29, yes. Thank you. 10 went to temporary housing, 3 went to rehabilitation programs, and 7 ended up back in the shelter, the homeless shelter, or other forms of homelessness.
Okay. Veronica.
When a while back, I and a couple other legislators toured the Sunflower houses, and at the time, you had at least one resident who was, I don't know what to call it, lived there, but also was sort of helping out with other residents and run the place. I know that particular person is a friend of mine now, but I don't know anyone else there. And is that still a situation you have going on?
His position has not been filled. He was one of a kind. So,
yeah, but
I would if I could find someone, usually someone of the same capacity is full-time employed, and so we don't have someone that can come and shovel snow and do ice and check on everybody else because they're usually full-time employed and don't have the opportunities.
But we will say that the housing manager, who is now making sure that the residents have wraparound services, was himself once a Sunflower Houses client. And so it's really important to kind of show that OAR hires people who themselves have effectively matriculated in the program, gives them employment opportunities, and then they often are best suited to serve those folks because they themselves have been through it. And there's lots of trust there.
Okay. Shauna.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. My question was in regards to the staffing. I was on the board of OAR whenever we opened the Endeavor House, and I think initially we didn't realize I don't want to say management, but that there needed to be some type of supervision. And what unfortunately happened was that it really burnt out the staff at OAR because there were calls at all hours of the night, and it was a lot of management. And I don't think we had necessarily planned for that. And so I wanted to make sure that there is enough support for this type of housing, whether it's offered through URO or OAR, because I think that's going to be an important part of making sure that these houses are successful in the future for many years to come.
Yeah, if I can, Shauna, 100%, we lost 2 right off the bat, so our third is doing a phenomenal job. We had 6 different employees taking up different residents, kind of trying to make it work year 2. It was a decent strategy, but not long-term. It was just managing through the month by month until we get more acclimated. However, we still do, I actually am in charge of one client myself, and I go there probably 4 times a week because this one individual is mine. And so it's my job to get the outcomes that we're looking for. And with any hope, this individual is going to move into permanent housing come March 15th, if everything works out with the Section 8. So we're very, very looking forward. This is one that's been over a year, and it is an extremely difficult case, but I think we're going to have a positive outcome. And we're doing really, really well. As I said, the most difficult part about this job is our first goal is keeping people alive and then moving forward from there. So.
If I can also just add, I just really want to commend everyone at Sunflower Houses. Housing First models, Shauna, as you're saying, do require intensive staffing supports. And so the fact that this model has been so successful with extreme budget deficits and, and staff constraints is truly, truly incredible. And I will emphasize that Housing First, is generally focused on serving clients who have the greatest needs, right? And so these are folks who are generally coming from unsheltered status, who have complex medical conditions, we have complex behavioral health conditions. And so that requires a full service approach with different types of staffing for different types of needs. And so the promise of having better staffing and better financing will only make the program more successful.
Hey, Mike.
So I congratulate you on the 7%. That's a great number. The one I'm worried about is the 28%. And I'm just wondering, once they move out, they're no longer in the program. How do we continue services there? Like, what happens then?
I would just say that this also is an emphasis of the need for permanent housing. And because a lot of these folks, especially, so Housing First can be applied to many different types of housing programs, transitional housing, even shelter models, and as well as permanent housing. But for folks who have these really complex medical and behavioral health needs, they often need permanent housing through a Housing First model to remain stably housed over the long term. Again, because these are things, when you have, severe mental illness and multiple chronic medical conditions, these are just additional barriers where people need supports. And if we can give people, take housing out of the equation, it's quite successful in the long run. And so I think this is thinking about, how ensuring the availability of permanent housing for folks when they transition out of Sunflower.
When you say permanent housing, I just need some, specific on that. I mean, are we talking Section 8 housing just because then you don't really, the services may or may not happen? Or are you talking something like Lakeview Mental Health Services where you're in an apartment and you're getting the services directly kind of thing?
Yes, I'll turn it over to Dave, but this model is essentially called permanent supportive housing.
Okay.
And so again, it will totally depend on the clients themselves. Some people might not need, comprehensive services for an extended period of time. We also do see that, for, let's just say, like if someone has been experiencing unsheltered homelessness for about 10 years, they get into permanent supportive housing, they can stabilize over time, over like 5 to 10 years, again, depending on their needs, and then they can move out of that model. But ensuring that at least there is access to that really comprehensive, supportive socio-medical services at first is when it really works. But go ahead.
That's a much better answer than I'm going to give you. But basically, OTDA, which was the second grant that we received, and NYSHIP provides definitions for permanent, temporary institution and homelessness, and we just use that as a basis. Because they're one of our grant funders, we use that as a definition, and it fits one of those particular areas, and that's where we came up with it.
Yeah, but I'll just add that in practice, what we've seen is that affordable housing models that don't have those supportive case management, so both the personnel, the connection to services, transportation is a huge one, getting people to those services, that without that, it basically falls apart for this population. They're not stable enough over a long-term period to be able to just kind of be independent immediately. So part of why I think we saw that higher recidivism rate, rebooking recidivism rate post-program is because, they lose contact with OAR. And I would dare say that they still come back and talk and have the relationships, which is really important. But because OAR doesn't have the capacity to literally be offering the same kind of case management as they do for Sunflower houses clients, like it's dependent on the clients coming to them.
Right.
Whereas with Sunflower, it's somebody going to the clients, being there on the premises, regularly checking in on them. So it's a proactive approach.
And I think another key point is some of the permanent housing for our folks who have obviously low income issues, they're moving to Freeville, they're moving to Dryden, and that makes it even more difficult for the wraparound services. And we have 16 MOUs with community-based partners, and we have great collaborations, but there's difference. The wraparound services have to be people that are involved in mental health, people that are involved in substance use, that are just targeted for individuals. I think that's the missing ingredient. We have wonderful relationships with our community partners, but sometimes community partners isn't enough. They need an actual person who's in charge of housing folks that need those wraparound services. And I think the wraparound services is an individual that helps with mental health, an individual that helps with housing, with substance use, and I think we're missing that. We have great partners that give hours here, get hours there, but we need people committed to keeping that going. And I think that's the missing ingredient, and why the recidivism is so high.
I'll also just add very briefly, this is one of the references in the Sunflower Houses report. It's permanent supportive housing. It's from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And this is just a review of the evidence from around the world for these different models, and it goes through different population needs, so what type of client are you serving, how high are their needs, and different types of housing models as well. So if you all have specific questions, it's a great resource.
Okay, I might jump in with a couple comments. Let's see. Thank you for coming in and presenting. Thank you for doing this. The work involved is extraordinary. This is one of the hardest populations to work with in our community, and it's really critical that you're doing it. I don't want to foretell the future, but I'll try, that it sounds like we're going to have a budget request coming up. I certainly, as one of 14, would support continuing the sunflower houses experiment and considering greater funding, because it sounds like it's just more expensive than you initially anticipated. With that said, I share Mike's concern that you look at, once they get done with the program, at 28%, and if you add the 7% in that recidivate while they're in program, you're at 35%. You're really not different from the background noise that is the county, depending on how you measure. But I'm not too upset with that, in that this is really hard. I don't think we should be trumpeting a 7% number, though, because that really doesn't tell you very much. I think it's a very small data set, and people are there maybe 15 days to a year. So the time period they're in program may not be sufficient. And I'm also concerned on the data that says 98% of the people have a substance use disorder, and they're exiting, 7% are going to treatment. As I've lived with this issue year on year as a legislator, I have really come to doubt whether a voluntary approach to treatment is ever going to be effective, especially with the new drugs we're looking at, the xylazine, the fentanyl. They're so addictive, and they kill so many people that I hear what you're saying, Dave, about let's keep them alive, and we want to do that. But keeping people alive in a condition where they can continue to use these incredibly poisonous drugs, I don't know if this is where we're going. And I've been reading about programs across the country, one in particular in the Midwest called Women in Recovery, that is reaching like a 70% effectiveness rate. But it's 18 months of intensive treatment. And you hear housing first. Whenever I hear that, it triggers in my head. I don't like that term, because I immediately go, what comes second? Because it's all in what comes second. You can say housing first, and it can mean anything, it seems. And we've had people coming in and saying housing first to mean lots and lots of different things, where it's just housing, or it's just housing with some supports. And people say it's evidence-based, and I don't know. I would love to see us continuing Sunflower House, but also trying to build a model that's going to be a lot more expensive, but an 18-month model that defines what comes second in a meaningful way, and we get at trying to get to the 70% effectiveness rate, because 7% here doesn't excite me at all. I think a lot of these people will continue to use drugs and die.
Well, just to be clear, that 7% is people who went to inpatient residential rehabilitation programs. It does not reflect people who are using recovery services.
Do you have percentage on that?
We can get it. I think we could assess that. So I'll make a note for our next report.
I mean, notoriously hard to track.
Yeah,
what is
notoriously hard
there.
to track. But what I'll say is that, there is this question of what to send them to. And, and we already know that just housing is not enough for the kinds of health risks that they have. But I will just note here how difficult it is to be Sunflower when you have nothing to send them to. And so if there is something for the county to consider, is what would an effective evidence-based model look like for a longer term, maybe, rehabilitation program.
All the second. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And but really importantly, it's really one partner, right, Dave, that you've been able to kind of partner with to kind of receive those people who are seeking.
Yes, because they're fantastic, quick, and can get things done in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a bigger conversation, we need a lot more time for it than we have today. I apologize, but this has been good. Any closing comments, questions, or anything from anybody?
If I can respond, Rich, just to...
Sure, Dave.
The one part I think that's misleading with those that are institutionalized, in the beginning of the program, if someone was struggling with substance use where they needed to go to inpatient, they were out of the program. And then we learned that that didn't work, because then they came back to the community, had no place to live, maybe went to the shelter system and immediately started using again. So we stopped that, and that's why we now hold rooms. So currently, with the 10 people that are in there right now, 5 have been an inpatient, have come back to the program. So that's the new policy, that if you're willing to go to inpatient, we're going to save you this room. Also, with the opiate money, we have a care plan, which you then decide what is the plan, and then you're accountable that on a monthly basis. So if you're saying you're going to go to CARS, I need to verify that you're attending. If you're going to go to treatment court, we're going to verify that you went to treatment court. So if part of the opiate settlement money is a care plan where they decide what the 5 or 6 bullets are, and then we keep them accountable. Are you attending? I don't need to know anything else. Are you attending? And so we follow through with that.
All right.
So we're getting there. We're getting bits and pieces.
So it sounds like it's not 7%. It's better than that.
Yes.
It's not where we want to be yet.
No.
Okay. Veronica.
Yes. I'll try to be quick. 3 things. One is not necessarily from you, but I'd love at some point a better education on the evidence-based practices that are successful for people combating substance use disorders, whether it's getting sober or just getting stable or what, because I don't know a lot about that, but it keeps coming up. Second, thank you for the presentation, and I would also support continuing Sunflower House funding and strengthening it. I think that, like Rich said, this is really, really hard work, and to really support like all the people reentering from prison, we need like system-wide change. We need just way, way, way more services than we have, and I think some of what you shared illustrates that. But it sounds like Sunflower has gotten some actual traction with like meaningful, concrete, positive change for some people's situation, and that's great, and I don't want to let that go, and so I'd love to continue that, and also like learn from it in terms of, like you were just saying, what else do we need for like beyond Sunflower, on top of Sunflower. And then the last thing was, one of your recommendations was to the legislature was to formally petition New York State Assembly members and senators to add $7.8 million in transitional housing funding for non-New York City regions to their budget priority letters. And I think this is what Richard Rivera was lobbying for at Okay Thanks. I cannot remember the details right now, but is this...
It's linked in the electronic version of the report, Veronica, so you can kind of click on that request and then see the whole thing. But the gist of it is that the majority of transitional housing funding for New York State goes to the New York City region. Even though the landscape of incarceration has fundamentally changed across the state, now central western New York, Buffalo, Rochester, and our kind of combined areas receive almost 60% of people in reentry from state prisons. But there's no funding for housing them. And so we're trying to get state assembly members to understand you can't keep going with the old model of everybody goes back downstate from upstate, but in fact, actually now you need to fund these. So the model is to have an RFP where programs like OAR could petition for this funding from the state if it's approved, to essentially then run the program, which would offset costs for the county. And of course, we can do all of our petitioning, but it's much stronger if it actually comes from local legislators like yourselves.
Okay. So, this might be a member filed.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was like maybe appetite from my colleagues to do a resolution like 100%. This, although I think it couldn't go through this committee for this budget year because of timing.
Well, I mean, you could bring it to any legislative meeting as a member filed, but I'd also say just alert the people on housing and economic development, because that's their turf.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to see that effectuated in the New York State budget, it'd have to roll out here in the next week or so, because you're looking at April 1st deadline.
Yeah, which is why we provided that request to you all, so it could just be as simple as we support this request. And that could be the motion and the approval, and somebody could sign, maybe like the chair or something, because it is timely.
We like more words, though, generally.
I know you do.
Yeah.
Just try to be efficient, Rich.
Yes. Okay. All right. Anybody else? And I apologize, because we really do need to keep rolling. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it sounds like we will talk before the budget season.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Next up is Chair's report. And I do have some items I'd like to report on. Let's see. I attended NISAC, and I attended the Public Safety Committee, where I'm a member. And I just wanted to let you know about some of the resolutions we passed there and some of the conversation that's happening at the state level across other counties. One of them is that the issue of specialized secure detention has gotten no better across the state. This is the facility where you can hold somebody who's under 18 years old, so 16, 17-year-olds primarily, but it can be even younger than that. And this has been a continuing problem year on year. New York State has done effectively nothing to address it. And we have, fortunately, not that often experienced the problem here, but when it does occur in Tompkins County, we end up having somebody just sitting in the sheriff's department in an office, well, a converted office, and it's not what was intended by the legislation, and it's not good for the youth or the sheriff's department or anybody. One of the participants mentioned they were trying to get an 80-bed facility built down around Westchester. They're talking about $180 to $200 million. That's over $2 million a bed, so it's more expensive than a traditional jail to do one of these facilities, and it's years away. So we passed a resolution saying we don't like the status quo, as you might imagine. We passed another resolution regarding medically assisted treatment, and this was something I didn't know about, that if somebody is in state prison, there's full funding from the state for medically assisted treatment. At the jail level in the counties, there's $8.8 million allocated for it, which is not enough money. And in fact, I asked a question. I said, well, we passed a resolution saying fully fund this, New York State, at the jail level, if you really feel this is an important thing to use MATs. And we're talking about an additional $12 million, so around $20 million. So it's really not a huge expense for the state, but if they really have a commitment to MATs, they should fund it. Why we pick up that additional cost, I'm not sure. And then there was an interesting discussion about having a more sort of organized approach to reentry planning, that some counties are organizing committees and doing reentry planning like you get a discharge plan from a hospital when somebody's leaving jail, so that there is a written document that is getting input from a lot of different directions to figure out what are the needs for this person and how are they going to be addressed. I thought that was an interesting idea that we might want to talk about. Then they also talked about a model that's very similar to our CARE program, where we're sending out a mental health specialist with a deputy. This is a social service worker teamed with a deputy or a police officer. And they were suggesting that this is a different approach for dealing with people in the homeless encampments, that you take it away from a purely law enforcement approach, but the social workers going in who are trained in how to deal with these people can do it with some safety. And given that we're talking about doing a review of our outreach worker program, this might be something that we might want to talk about. There was consistent conversation in the room that if you're doing any kind of unified approach, it has to be done, well, approach where you're using social workers, mental health workers, and law enforcement, it has to be done under one roof, because if it's not tightly coordinated, it's not going to work very well. And just some other information, probation officers do not get 207C protection. And I wasn't aware of this, but you know, the sheriff and our probation director can talk about this a bit more, but injuries on the job happen, and we're asking probation officers to become more involved in situations where they are subject to potential injury. I thought that was something that New York State should be looking at. And then there was some stuff that I think our Director of Emergency Response is going to talk to you regarding Next Gen 911. And then, just so you know, they talked about 24,000 bills have been introduced to the legislature for the year. in this legislative session. And it's more than any other state in the country. It is overwhelming. And from NICEC's standpoint, they can't track all the bills that are introduced. And it's become sort of this project for legislators to introduce as many as possible. It's become pretty problematic, especially because the bills that get passed, like 700 of 900 that will actually be voted on, get passed in the last 2 days. So nobody sees them. And we call this democracy. But anyway, those are my notes from NICEC that pertain to public safety other than the last one. Actually, there is one other thing. If you look at page 78 of your packet, there are the rescue EMS package, and this was discussed at NICEC, where they have gone through and selected out a series of bills related to emergency medical services, and they are trying to lobby consistently across all of these bills to say, pass these as a package, rather than going through and trying to cherry pick one or the other. And I thought that was an interesting approach. I'm not going to go through this in any detail, but we may want to do something similar to send a message from Tompkins County on support of this legislative package, either by direct lobbying with our representatives or doing a resolution that goes everywhere. Then, and just moving on, I know this is Chair's report, I want to get through it. I did want to respond to the member of the public who talked about traffic obstructions and protests, because these seem to be happening more often. And I did watch the video of it, of what happened on Seneca Street. Nobody got hurt, and from listening to the tape, I thought the Ithaca Police Department handled it in a very professional way and just routed the traffic around the people in the street. I think they were out there maybe 10, 15 minutes, but that was long enough to really back up traffic. As I said, nobody got hurt, but you know, the data on psychology and car use is people are far more aggressive in a motor vehicle than they would ever be outside of their vehicles. All you need is one person to say, I am driving through this, and you've got serious, serious injury. And I know that the people who are protesting were earnest, but I don't think they understand the danger that they posed. Again, it didn't go wrong here, but like Martin Luther King, you know, you do your protest, you kind of should live with the consequences of civil disobedience. I think there maybe should be some tickets written here or arrests, that we don't want to have somebody killed in our street at one of these protests, my view. But I'm happy to take comment from anybody else on it. Okay.
Packed agenda, I'll let it go.
Okay. County administration.
Thank you.
Hi, Bridget.
Rich.
Welcome.
Thank you. 2 items on the agenda underneath county administration, one a resolution and one departmental goals. What would you like to start with?
Why don't we get the resolution out of the way? I think that's on page 55, is it? And this is authorization to appropriate funding, implementation of a memorandum of agreement between Tompkins County and Tompkins County Deputy Sheriff's Association, ID 12230. Can I get a motion? Lee moves. Shauna seconds. Okay, do you want to just explain what's going on here?
Sure, and I know the sheriff is here as well, and he can speak to this, but this essentially authorizes the increases in deputy salaries that were agreed upon through the memorandum of agreement, and I believe they will be implemented as of July of this year. Sheriff Osborne, if you wanted to add anything to that, please feel free.
Hi, all. I think Bridget covered it. Yeah, this is an extension of our union contract for our road patrol that extends the contract 1 year and institutes a market adjustment to their salary. It also accomplishes another thing, like I said, the big one being getting us through another year by extending that contract a year. So I think it's a good thing.
And this was instigated by the county, my recollection, correct?
That's correct.
And so this was outside of, we had our union contract or our bargaining agreement, but we added this. So it was an affirmative step.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Veronica?
Yeah, sorry, can you remind us why, or where the increases are coming from? Like, I see that it seems like a few things are happening here, and I kind of lost track of the, like what looks like a cost of living increase and some other increases. And also this is what, extending a contract past the previous end date of the contract to get more time out of it?
This came about.
And then my question would be like, why, other than the cost of living, which is basic?
No, it's a market adjustment that was in direct correlation to what occurred in the city of Ithaca with the Ithaca Police Department. Basically, they instituted pay raises and sign-on bonuses to the level that we were fearful that we would lose members of our agency to go to that PD. So we came up with a plan to create a market adjustment to put us more in line with them. I think this is a good deal for the county. It does add another year that we now don't have to go back into negotiations for. The deputies still will be making significantly less than IPD officers, but this gets us a heck of a lot closer, and I thought it was a reasonable accommodation and a win-win for all of us, quite honestly.
Okay. Anything further? Are we ready to vote?
I guess just another question. Yeah,
go ahead,
what
go ahead.
if the city were to raise, is this the end of this? Or if the city were to raise their, sorry, not sheriffs, whatever they are, salary, will we be in an upward, I don't know, arms race in police departments? Is there a risk of this?
I think there's always a risk of this, that we live in a competitive salary environment. It's possible. I would also suggest that the city may be near the end of its spending capability on this. They're paying a lot for their officers. I don't know that they would be considering a major increase, but don't know. Shauna?
Yeah, I see this as something that we really have to do. We want the best people out there, and we also want to be competitive. I think we've seen in the past, whenever our deputy number goes low, people work more overtime, and at the end, your balance sheet is going to be more if you don't have the right amount of staff. I would also caution us to think about a time where we were short-staffed and you have deputies that are working 20-plus hours of overtime. The last thing you want coming to a dangerous scene is someone that's on their 15th hour of overtime. And so, I think we need to pay people what the going rate is. I do understand what you're saying, Veronica, as far as, are they going to be going against each other, and are people going to jump one ship to come to the other, and is it going to swing back and forth? The reality is that we do this for many positions that are competitive, and we really do want the best people in our force here.
Yeah, Shauna, I think you make some good points about overtime. We do not want our officers working excessive overtime. Yeah, so, anybody else? Okay, Veronica.
Last thing, I'll vote for this to move forward, but I'd be interested in seeing some contextualization of these numbers in the overall, both sheriff's department budget and the salaries and budgets for other, maybe not all the departments, but for other positions that are on-call emergency response, in some sense, overtime, being sleepy on the job would not be good, some of our highway positions, some of our health positions, and the 911 dispatchers.
Okay, all right, with that, Shauna?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So that passes. Okay. Bridget? Goals?
Yes.
You got some goals?
Yes, so as we've done with other legislative committees, we've compiled the goals of those departments that report to the Public Safety Committee. Those have been included here in your packet. All of the departments are represented here by staff. So if you had any questions or wanted to hear anything further, we can direct those to the individual departments.
I would defer first to any of the committee members. Anybody have questions, comments? Let's see. For assigned counsel, I know we're going to talk about this in committee goals a little bit, but there was some discussion at our last meeting on wait times and delaying court appearances. I was wondering if there was any direct goal to measure wait times and how to improve, if there truly are delays there. I think we need to understand whether that's happening, but if it is, how do we make that better? And then Department of Emergency Response, I saw the backup dispatch center goal to complete construction by 2024. Do we have a month in 2024 where that might happen? And then in the EMS program, there's Launch Rapid Medical Response Program anticipated by end of second quarter 2024, if not sooner. And I had thought I'd heard April as April 1st. Maybe I was just being foolish, but. And then as an additional goal, I was wondering about flood events, because we certainly spent a tremendous amount of time outside of county government talking about, well, some in county government talking about the stormwater management in the city of Ithaca and how we're behind schedule on dredging the inlet, but also in clearing the creeks and doing stream bank management. Until that is really addressed, I feel like we're kind of on borrowed time, that we will get a significant rain event and have a real big, I see Michael has appeared in person, but as a goal, I was wondering if that's an appropriate thing for Department of Emergency Response to think about the response to a significant flood. And then I see in the Tompkins County Sheriff's Department the Corrections Division succession planning. I was wondering if there is a date when our jail captain is planning to retire, when this will all kick off. And then 5, implementation of a body-worn camera program in the jail. I couldn't remember if we funded that. Did we put funding against that for this year?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, okay. Those are my comments. Anybody else?
Would you like me to answer that question, Rich?
Sure.
Were you asking that question of me, of jail captain?
The questions were put on the floor. If you have an answer, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I hope I have an answer. Well, that would be bad. Yeah, we have moved forward with a new hire for jail captain. Her name is Lauren Harrison. She comes to us from Steuben County, where she's been a lieutenant there for many, many years. Very impressive resume. She's actually going to start with us sometime in April, I forget the exact date, and work alongside our current captain, Ray Bunce, who will be retiring by the end of the year. So there is quite a bit of overlap. We were able to make that work with our budget, which is a good thing. We do have a lieutenant position in the jail that will remain open until the current captain is completely gone. We're using some of that funding to be able to pay for both of them. But I think it's a good plan that we have in place. I'm very excited to have her. She is coming down next week to tour the jail, have lunch with us, and I look forward to bringing her to a meeting and having everybody get a chance to meet her. So,
thank you so much for that news. That's great. That's great. Okay.
Rich, did you want me to answer your questions?
Sure, sure.
So right now, we anticipate the construction being finished at the backup center May 31st. We have run into another small issue that we're hoping that we'll have resolved, at least a strategy by the end of next week. I have a call right after this meeting to discuss. It has to do with the placement of one of our microwave antennas that was originally planned to be on the main structure. However, because the dispatch center has to be structurally separated from the main structure, the town now wants us to move it to another location. That's going to require another path study to be done by Motorola and probably some customized work that we weren't initially planning, but that won't delay the work to be done to structurally separate the buildings. And as of last week, Cornell is telling us May 31st. So with regards to the Rapid Medical Response Program, our date for rollout still remains April 1st, even though the goals said by the end of the second quarter. That's still our goal, and I think we're moving along nicely in that way. And later on in the meeting, Joe will give an update. With regards to flood planning, I couldn't agree with you more. I actually come from an area that routinely flooded. The community would flood every several years, and we would have a lot of residents that were displaced, and times homes would have to be raised. And as part of the strategy that we have developed to build a new comprehensive emergency management plan, which will serve the entire county, it will have both hazard and functional specific annexes in that plan, one of which will be for flood emergencies.
Okay, so you cover that in number 2 of your goals.
Yes.
I feel better already, Michael. Okay. Veronica.
I have some questions too. I guess, Mike, for you, a couple things. The continuity of operations plan, I'm glad to see that on there. And I also went to NISAC and went to a session that was like actually partially about COOP planning with a couple people from Madison County, I think, and they described a large part of their emergency response director's process was bothering other department heads to please finish up their COOP plans and send them in. What's our process or your process gonna look like? Do you know?
Yeah, so it's going to dovetail into the comprehensive emergency management plan. That's something that Jessica is spearheading. But part of what we're looking to do is, with the vendor that we're going to be using to help build the plans, they're going to be doing workshops, for example, not only for community members, but also internal stakeholders to really walk them through the process. I think where sometimes these programs have struggled when they're doing rollouts, they'll just send out information and ask people to complete it and send it back, as opposed to really working with them personally in the development of their action items. And that's what we're going to be working with Tetra Tech, the vendor that we're going to be using. We'll be doing some more what I consider the personal touch, so that they're not just left to have to fill it out without any real background or context. We'll be working with them personally on that.
Awesome, thank you. And then the search and rescue team, can you remind us or me what the current status of it is?
Sure. So the search and rescue team right now is currently being hosted by the Slaterville Fire Department. So essentially they're really the point when it comes to the search and rescue team. And we've had some really just some preliminary discussions with them and also with the Rangers about whether or not we can help support them in really rebuilding that team. There's not a lot of members left on the team. The leaders that run the team are doing a great job, but just like so many other volunteer organizations in the county, they struggle. And in order to be part of the team in Slaterville, you have to be a member of one of the other community-based volunteer services. So, but they would typically go out and look for, say, for example, a lost hiker or one of the state forests. So what we want to do is anything that we can to help support the rebuilding of that team, because there's really only a few members left.
Awesome, thank you. And then, can I ask a couple more?
Yeah, go ahead.
One for Lance, I guess in yours, one of your goals is continuing the transformation of the department website, if you're there. And I'm wondering how that syncs up with like the overall county website transformation process.
Ken, if you want, I can add, I was going to answer all of these in my report, if that's okay, or I can do it now, whichever. I was just trying to be efficient about it.
Either way, you're on screen, jump in.
Let me answer the two, the transformation. We're doing two things. We're working to update our department website to kind of bolster and create some more transparency in what we're doing and have more reporting there if people want to see it. Some of that will be linked to the CJC. We're also working with them on our data provision. We've given them data and we're building that data out. So over the next months, you're gonna see that. We've had ongoing discussions. First, we're kind of working with CJC there on that data. We have ongoing discussions with them. They have some data. I mean, we've been giving them data, and we're expanding our data out there, and then we're going to look at moving some of that on our website along with some other information that we'll be putting on our department website. In part, I think, recognize the CJC, the county website is going to get more visibility first, and then we'll build out our own there as well as another information site. But I think maybe I'm not realistic enough. I think most people don't think about going to the assigned counsel county website or department website in search of information. So we're going to build that out, but it's kind of, the CJC takes priority, I think, because that'll, frankly, provide more information to the public faster. If I answered your question.
That does, thank you.
All right, thanks, Lance.
And then the other one, I guess, Rich, this is a little more involved if you want me to cover it. I'm happy to do it now. The wait time, I assume you're talking about, by wait time, the assignment of attorneys to cases.
Yes, and I think ready for trial in the real sense of, getting the trials scheduled and doing them. It sounds like there's been some delays there. But you educate us.
Let me address the assignment issue first and then the trial issue, because they're two different issues. The assignment issue, we see it more in family court as a bigger issue for us, frankly. That a couple of factors in terms of family court. We had an overall reduction in the panel size for various reasons, which delayed. And on the family court side, we had a big backlog of cases, so we had attorneys kind of overwhelmed there, maxed out, which has really delayed, in some cases, family court assignment. And part of that also is we prioritize criminal case assignment over some of the family court assignments, because we have attorneys who do both. If you have a criminal case where someone's, incarcerated or looking at incarceration, with more significant immediate consequences, you have to address that first in terms of assignment. On that, we've done, there have been a couple of factors where we're seeing some improvement now. You're going to continue to see that, I think, over the course of the year. One thing is recruitment of attorneys. This is going to be part of my report. We're working on increasing that. We added, just in the last couple weeks here, we're in the process of adding, we have 6 new attorneys coming on board the panel, primarily doing criminal work, maybe some family work. 3 of them are new attorneys. One is an attorney, a young woman from the local area who actually attended law school down in the city, and we've worked on recruiting her for about the last year and a half, and she's just sworn in the 15th of this month. Been working as a law clerk with the program using some state funds. Matt's attorneys in city court have met her, and we have 2 newer attorneys who are coming on the panel who are attorneys in Ed Crossmore's office. And they're seeing the benefit of having us, getting them into court, working with judges and so forth. It helps train them up. His firm just does civil work, but they see value added to them in working with us, and it's a value added to us. And then we have 3 more experienced attorneys coming on the panel. 2 of them were ADAs in Cayuga County, who formed their own private firm, left there with another attorney. They're already have some cases. Those are people who can handle, they're experienced criminal attorneys. And
for context, Lance, for context, if you have 6, how big is the whole panel?
How big is the whole panel? Our criminal panel is Our total panel is in the 30s. We used to reach up to 50s, but if I say 30 or even giving to 40, 7 or 8 of those don't do a lot for us. You know, we have some who just do caps or may take a case here and there. Our core panel of criminal, we're now would be up to about 20, 21. Family court, probably about the same, but some, you know, there's some of those I'm double counting people.
Okay, but adding 6 is meaningful.
It is meaningful. And one of the things, even with new attorneys, what that means is we can assign them to lower level cases, and that allows us to not assign those to more experienced cases, and then have those attorneys have more space, if you will, on their caseload to take on felonies, more critical, you know, larger, you know, in more involved cases. So it is an important addition.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
The other thing I could add there, Rich, I'm sorry to,
yeah.
sorry, I'll try to be quick about this. The other thing we're seeing that's helping us with wait times is the effect of the increase in rates. You know, that was done last April, but what we realized was attorneys didn't really see the impact. They knew the increase in rates was occurring, but people didn't really begin to feel that in their pocketbook until late 2023, because they don't see that until they invoice a case at the end of the case. So they're seeing that now in the early months, and they're looking at that increased income, and they're saying, and they're also clearing calendars, go, yeah, give me some more cases. So, which we're happy to oblige with. So I think we're going to see continued improvement there.
Good. Okay. Well, that's all good information. All right. Anybody else on goals? Yeah.
Still for you, Lance, this last one, implement process for discovery review by clients in Tompkins County Jail. What's the status quo right now?
Well, right now, the attorneys have to, they provide that. And one of the things that's been an issue is, you know, we get body camera footage and everything, which is electronic. And so what we're looking at, and Captain Bunce has been receptive of, you know, we had some initial talks. I have to circle back with him. We've looked at what other counties have done. So what we're looking at a model now to improve this is we have state grant money we can use for this, so no cost to the county, is purchasing a couple of tablet type of, you know, Surface computers that IT can set up to meet the requirements of the Sheriff's Department, because you don't want to be providing, frankly, a tablet or like a Surface type laptop that one of our clients in jail can thoughtfully use to surf the internet. But we've looked at what other counties have done. You can lock that down, so basically all that Surface, you know, tablet could be used for is they're given the discovery on a thumb drive, and they can sit there and review all of their discovery, and they'll be able to view the body stuff they're all entitled to view. And it also reduces our attorney time in terms of having, you know, this way you'll be able to have a client, they'll have improved access to their discovery, which they're entitled to, and they can sit there and go through it. You know, some of the body camera footage, you can have hours of body camera footage in a case, and you don't want an attorney sitting there with them trying to go through it with them. That just frankly wastes a lot of attorney time that I pay for. And then they can meet with the attorney, go through questions and so forth. So it's designed to kind of implement process. You know, historically, we didn't really have information stored electronically like we do now. So this will speed that process up.
Okay.
And provide, you know, kind of fuller review for the clients.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on departmental goals?
I have
Veronica.
one last question for the sheriff, whose turn it is next anyway, I think. I'm excited to see a goal about the jail garden program, which is great. And I'm just curious, there's a thing about managing transports, but like transports to where?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up, that was another thing I was going to talk about during my time, but we can knock it off the list now. Yeah, it's too bad, I believe Tali has probably left the building, but I was going to publicly thank him and his group. He's brought in some experienced hands in the farming world to take a look at what we have. I think you know that our garden did fall into some disrepair during COVID times, but we're looking to get that back up and going. We probably a month or so ago, we had a bunch of chopped up leaves brought in that we were able to spread and tarp over to get the soil back up to where it needs to be, and hopefully expand that program a little bit and bring in some more offerings, different types of vegetables and fruits, and maybe even make it a little bit bigger if we can find the space. We talked about maybe having a small greenhouse with the aim of teaching our inmates some skills and getting them outside in the weather and doing some good stuff. So I'm excited about that. You asked something else too. Oh, the transports.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with our transports. If you can recall, quite some time ago, we had a very significant staffing shortage in the jail. That's been fixed due to a lot of actions we all took. But we moved away a little bit from using correction officers to do the majority of our transports and created special deputy positions, SBOs are called, to take on a lot of those so we can keep our staff in our jail the best we can. That's all that is. So it's been a process trying to work out the kinks and get that all up and going, but knock on wood, it's been working, and we're hoping to fine tune that and continue that throughout the year.
Okay, good. All right. Bridget, is there more?
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, thank you to county administration. There. And Veronica was right. Next up is our sheriff. And we have the sheriff's office report. Welcome.
Thanks. I think we knocked off most of my stuff. I only got a couple other things just to mention. I just got offered a position on the board of directors for the Southern Tier Crime Analysis Center. So I'm excited to do that. That's a group that we've all been working on more extensively, more so than ever, with our GIV details, the gun-involved violence elimination. They provide a lot of intelligence gathering information, some forensic capabilities that help us solve crimes. Been a really good resource, so I start that this month. So I'm kind of excited about that because, as you may know, I mean, I was an investigator in the past, and I kind of like that stuff, and I think it'll be a neat group to join and hopefully bring their resources to our community even better. Today we put a press release out. You may have seen our third and latest dashboard has been made public, and that has to do with our unarmed response unit with our sheriff clerks. That's out there, so that's in addition to our defensive actions or use of force stats and our care team. Good information on there. It highlights Sam Pulliam, our sheriff clerk, and the good work he's doing. So that's exciting. We just finished a cleaning certification program in our jail. Several inmates signed up for that. One of our sergeants in there provided the training. There's a curriculum that goes with it. I had no idea how involved it was. You think cleaning, it's like a simple thing. But the test is actually really, really hard. It's an exam you have to actually take in the classroom to get certified, and that gives them a certification they can take with them when they apply for jobs once they're released. They were really excited about that. We had a little pizza party for the ones that went through the program. They raved about it up and down. So we're looking to expand that program and continue that. Lastly, we have 2 correction officers graduating from the academy now, and we have 2 more that just started last week. As I said, we are full staffed in the jail, which is probably the only jail in New York State that I know that is. So I think that's a really good thing we were able to accomplish. And now we're just to the point where we got to get them all sent to the academy. So it's going to be a process for that. We're going to send as many as we can this year and just keep going until we get it all caught up. So that's it.
Okay. Anybody else? I did have a question about page 66 in the packet, the Monroe County Sheriff's letter that you signed on to. And this seems pretty straightforward, but I was wondering if you had any thoughts on it. This is asking for asking for a federal waiver to the Medicare and Medicaid programs to allow better medical treatment and reimbursement.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Yeah, that was actually brought up by Sheriff Baxter in Monroe County. He asked other sheriffs that may be interested in signing on to that. Of course, I was. I think we're all on the same page in the area that we have to provide care to our inmates as best we can, and a lot of it has to do with addiction issues. And I saw this as an opportunity to perhaps obtain that in a different and better way. So I have not heard a response to that letter, or if we'll even get one. But yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah. Well, I hope somebody reads it and does something about it.
Yeah, I can say, you know, I was impressed. The governor actually came to our last sheriff's conference. I had not seen a governor ever come, and I don't believe one had for many, many years. And she spoke to us, and it was pretty neat. I gave her a lot of credit for that, for showing up and talking. So that was neat.
Okay, good. All right, anything further for our sheriff? Veronica.
I just thank you for your transparency efforts. Noting the press release that I saw earlier today, and also sometime a couple weeks ago, I was sitting with some people who were curious about our jail information and wondering where they could get that, and I was able to just go to your website, and it was pretty easy to find and point them to, so thanks for keeping that up.
Yeah, absolutely. We got more to come. The ones that we got out, one was pretty difficult to actually accomplish. The others made it easier once we got the one done, and we'll just keep plugging away, and hopefully we'll have them all done by the end of the year. That's my hope anyways.
Okay. All right. Moving on, we have our district attorney with us in 3 dimensions. He's here in the building.
Yeah. Hi, Rich.
Welcome.
I'm going to try to keep this under 30 minutes, if that's okay.
Fair enough.
So talking about data dashboards, as we all know, I have one, and Tiffany Ho, my data analyst, is doing a fantastic job, and once we have it launched now, she continues to reach out to other jurisdictions and organizations, trying to get feedback on it, try to see what we can expand on. She's recently been invited to join a national group of data analysts who are all working from DA's offices across the country to share best practices and learn from each other. So I think that's awesome. And we're going to keep building the dashboard out based on community feedback and also based on what we see other people doing or other jurisdictions doing across the country. So that's, I'm always interested in feedback from anybody about the dashboard, and it's an ongoing process. So that's one thing. I do have... If
I could just interrupt you to say, I really appreciated your presentation at CJATI on the dashboard yesterday, and it's impressive. If anybody hasn't seen it yet, it's a really comprehensive look at,
Yeah, we spent a lot of time putting it together. It took most of last year, at least the last half of 2023, to get it launched, and I think it's been widely recognized of the, we're talking to the Philly DA's office that has a lot more resources and money than we do, and LA, and they're all, see us as peers in terms of what we're putting out to the public, so we're happy with it. I have an opening for an assistant DA that I'm just starting to post for. That was a recent development, unexpected one, but one that we're hoping to cast a wide net and get a diverse candidate pool interested in the position. So that's something I wanted to mention, and we'll make it work with one less attorney in the office for the time being until we find the right person. That we've been lucky not to have that situation for a while, but now we have it, and we'll make it work. The last thing I wanted to say is more of a comment on the Sunflower House presentation. And, you know, I love and hate statistics because you can just bend them and twist them for whatever your purpose is. And so we have to recognize that. But, you know, talking about the 7% and the 28%, I think it's important to note the group of individuals that we're focusing on, the people that are living in that house. I would suggest that their percentage would be 100 if they weren't in Sunflower House. So it's comparing them to the average person in Tompkins County or even the average person in the justice system is a comparison. It's a faulty comparison. I think that we have to remember that this group of individuals, any period of stability that they can have where they are much more supported and less likely to be in the justice system again is a huge success. So, you know, that's just a comment I wanted to make to remind everybody of that from my point of view.
And I think that's right. You know, it's not 7%. It may be 35%, in fact, when you add them together, but it's still, this is what we're dealing with, and this is.
I think the 7 would be in the 28. I think those overlap. I don't think it's 7 plus 28. I think it's 28, including the 7.
I don't know. That would have been a good question.
But they're you know, going back to my point about statistics.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
yeah, Lee?
And I appreciate your comment on that, Matt and Rich. I'd just love to see it quantified in some real numbers. And it looks to me as though it's a $180,000 a year investment. And somewheres there's a number, 20 or 30 people that aren't incarcerated. And that's not a bad investment. And they're back into stable housing. And the recidivism rate is apparently lower than what it would be had this program not been there.
Yeah.
And it looks like as though a program that could see some expansion or some potential and further development. So that's what I would like to see.
I think that's true. I'd like to see a lower differential when they leave the program, you know, post-program, that it's not quite as much of a jump. But you're right, Matt. This is better than if we did nothing at all. Very clearly, yeah.
My 2 cents.
Yeah. All right, anything further for our district attorney after he put his 2 cents in? Okay, let's keep going. Next up is Department of Emergency Response. And
good afternoon, Rich. I'm just going to ask Joe to come on, and he's going to give an update on the EMS program.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have a few updates. So we submitted our application to the region for review. Their meeting for the Regional EMS Council is March 19th. Assuming that gets approved by them, they will support it onto the state for its final approval for us. We are hoping for, I know it was brought up earlier, a go live date of April 1st. Hoping to onboard our staff at the March 18th county onboarding. We have received acceptance letters from 6 out of the 9 positions, so we're still working on those last 3. And we are continuing to work with Terry to secure some additional vehicles. And Mike, if there's anything you can think that I missed?
No, not at the moment, but we, and what he means by that as far as the vehicles is that we do have vehicles lined up. In order to use them, we have to backfill a few, and Terry's been working well with us, but we will have 3 vehicles ready to go on April 1st.
Okay. And just a little bit of additional information for the committee members. I believe Lisa is meeting with the towns in the city right around now to have further discussions about funding for 2025. So hopefully we can make this sustainable in the years to come. But exciting times, and it looks like at our next meeting we'll be very close to seeing if the April 1st date is good to go. And Michael, you and I talked about the quality of the candidates we got in the pool, and it sounded like it was pretty good.
Yeah, we're really pleased. We're also very pleased with the number of candidates that applied, and I think we do close to, what was it, 38 interviews, Joe?
There was 34 applications that were approved by HR that we reviewed. 27 of them responded to an interview. There's a handful that never responded back to us. And we're still right around that 26 number after our last canvas letter.
Yeah. Questions, comments on the rapid medical response rollout? Okay. A couple other things I was hoping you could touch on. One is the EMT training program. I think the next cohort is close to going. Is that correct?
Yep, so the current EMT class is underway. It's being held at CMC's new training center at the mall. I believe that's a Tuesday, Thursday class this year. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know they only have 2 open slots after they started. So they had a very, very good turnout for that. We are still looking at advanced EMT classes and paramedic classes for hopefully this fall. And the airport fire is going to be hosting a refresher class for EMTs that need to refresh their certification. And that'll start in April.
Yeah, that's really good news. And then, Michael, if there were some items that we were talking about from NISAC on Next Gen 911, and the statement they made up in Albany was that the counties really need to be ready, hardware and software, for the New York State EZNet, which is the backbone that New York State is building that would allow 911 systems to communicate pretty much across the state. And this would be a transformational improvement over what we have now in terms of being able to have emergency response systems assist each other, even in non-contiguous counties. And they use the example of the big snowstorm last year in Buffalo, where they were overwhelmed in their 911 centers. And with a Next Gen 911 and the EZNet, you could have responders from across the state assisting, which sounds like that would make the whole system much more resilient. But I had asked you the question, are we ready? And you responded to me, and I thought it would be worth it for you to share that answer with the rest of the committee.
Yeah, absolutely. So EZNet is more of a state program as opposed to Next Gen 911 is really something that's happening at the national level. As part of our backup center project, we are moving towards Next Gen 911 in a very, what I consider to be methodical process. Once we get closer to completion, there'll be some more software that we'll be able to roll out to make us more in line with really Next Gen 911. For example, text 911, having the ability for dispatchers to have video feed that comes into the 911 center. These are all components of Next Gen 911 and that we are working towards.
Okay. And I realize we are running towards the end of our time, so we're going to need to move on, but I appreciate the report from emergency response. Is there anything else before we march forward? Okay. Next up is Department of Probation and Community Justice, and I see Dan's with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I just first off wanted to thank the Sheriff and Sergeant Ziegenfuss for setting up a recent threat evaluation reporting course. It was a 3-day basic and full threat assessment or threat evaluation reporting course. It was one of the best trainings I've been to in my entire career. Very, very well run by Homeland Security. Some other people on this meeting were also there and completed that. Really great training, and thank you for having it locally so we didn't have to travel far, and that's gonna, I think, be very helpful in formulating a successful threat assessment and management team here in the county. Happy to announce that Monday the 4th, we will be fully staffed for the first time in 11 months. Thank you for your support of that. It's been recognized by my staff, and as we get people back, getting their workloads back down to manageable levels where we can do a good job assisting people in their rehabilitation efforts rather than constantly stamping out fires and ignoring the people who are doing well at times. While we've been sitting in this meeting, the sheriff, DA Van Houten, and Chief Kelly and I each got an invitation to apply for Give 11 grant. So it seems quick, but our Give 10 year will be up on June 30th, and it appears the state is going to ask us to reapply for that grant funding for 2024 and 2025.
Okay.
My staff was asked to join a meeting yesterday for people doing the oversight of Give for Office of Probation Correctional Alternatives. They were querying us on, our compliance with the contractual obligations that we agreed to. They seem to be very pleased with the outcome and the information we were able to provide to them. And overall, I think Give has been a massive asset to this county as far as reducing violent crime and addressing that. Just all around, the partnerships between the agencies and cooperation has been fantastic. So I look forward to continuing that if we're able. Got our first new hire signed up for 4-week fundamentals of probation practice training in April and May. That'll be followed in June and July she'll be the first probation officer in Tompkins County that's had to go through the 9-week basic course for peace officer class. So we're looking forward to hearing how that goes. I don't know if you were able to review the goals for my department. We're really engaging in a lot of training, safety training. Seems like the state's move is towards more law enforcement stance for probation with the basic course for peace officer, which is essentially 2 weeks shy of basic course for police officer minus the firearms piece. So we're going to finally be getting the training that police officers get minus the firearms.
Dan, I had a question on that. If they're qualified as a peace officer, does that make them eligible for 207C? You're muted.
I apologize, I hit my mouse. No, probation is not covered by 207C. And it's, I think, one example of many I could point out where we're kind of on the cusp of being recognized as law enforcement and rehabilitative and haven't been really given a lot of the coverage and protections that police officers have. We don't, part of our recruitment and retention issue, and I'd love to explain this further when we have more time, but with Tier 5 and Tier 6, we're gonna have probation officers having to work until they're 64 years old, where a police officer could retire after 20 or 25 years, depending on the agency. The state did pass a law that would allow counties to allow probation officers to retire at 25 years, but the counties had to buy into that. Many counties are now pursuing that, and through the Council of Probation Administrators, we're making a push for the state to consider mandating that for all probation officers rather than have it be a county-by-county decision. To my objection, I was voted president-elect of the Council of Probation Administrators for 2024 to 2025. So I'll be taking that over in June. I think it's an important thing for the state to consider because of the safety risks of having an aging population of probation officers. It's really going to create a disincentive for people who want to go into law enforcement because they know they can retire at 20 or 25 years when they're 40, 45 years old, or they can work until they're 64 as a police officer, or as a probation officer, I'm sorry. So it would mandate people to retire at 25, but it would enable them to do that if they should so choose. I really think in 15 years, which is a long ways from now, but if we don't plan for it now, we're going to have a problem. in about 15 years, you're going to have a very aged set of probation officers working everywhere in the state rather than, except for the 5 counties that approved the 25-year retirement.
That sounds like that would be a subject for a discussion at another meeting. I think it would bear some more time.
Yes.
So,
and I know that we're short on time, so I'll wrap up. Everything here otherwise is going well.
okay. And you have a resolution, reappropriation of pretrial grant for benefit of the pretrial program of Tompkins County, ID 12240. Could I get a motion on that? Veronica moves. Mike seconds. Okay. Do you want to speak to this, Dan?
Yes, this is the 2022 funds that we received in the 11th hour of 2022 to support our work with pretrial. It started out as $120,000. I believe we have around $80,000 left, requesting to roll over.
And use the money. I think we want you.
Use the money for the public good.
I think we want you to do that. Are there any questions or comments? We ready to vote? Shauna?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. All right. Anything further for probation and community justice? All right. Thank you, Dan. And then Lance, we heard from you before, but let's...
I'll try to be quick. There are a couple of things here. First, the data we provided. One note here, I saw when it came out in the package, I'll work with Brittany and people, see if we can, that's kind of how we scan it and send it to them, see if we can fit those sheets in so it's a little easier for you to read. You don't have to play with your computer. I looked at that and went, oh, what the hell, frankly. But on our data, it's there, and I'll see if you have any questions. But I included for January 2024, you see, we also collect weekly data for every month. My thinking was not to give that to you unless you want it, because from my perspective, it creates a lot of noise or clutter in the data and not much use to you, probably. It's probably more of the monthly data, and then as you see it over the, build over the year, you'll may mean more to you. But that's, if you want it, we'll give it to you, but I'm not sure it's going to.
I would defer to the other committee members, but I don't think we need that. I think the monthly is good enough. Yeah. I did have a question, Lance, on, say, page 94, where you're showing us the 2024 types of cases. The 139 matters, are those new or are those that are in process?
Those are new. What this data is reflects each month the cases we assign. These are people who have applied and we've assigned. So that means 139 cases we assigned in January. Although that does include, you'll see over the course of the year, denials. Those are what a denial is, where someone's applied and we've denied them for financial reasons. So because it's a case we handle, we include it. But that's 139 new cases in January, family and criminal court.
Okay.
And then what we do is we break it down. Well, I think it's kind of, the first tier is family, and then felonies and types of criminal cases. And then we also track by court, the courts we cover. So you'll be able to see over the years what courts are busy, what's going on with each court, which may be of interest to people. I can tell you, you'll see in this, our busiest courts are, of course, Ithaca City Court, and then Lansing, Town of Ithaca, and Dryden, historically, are always the biggest courts in terms of cases, which kind of reflects population, but no big surprise there.
Yeah. Well, I certainly want to say thank you, Lance. This is a lot of work, and but I think it helps us get a view of what you're doing in the assigned counsel program. So it's really valuable.
Sure. And then just the last thing I gave you was that, so you'd have some historical comparison of what we've done, because I knew you hadn't seen our data. you know, and it's in larger chunks there. Our historical data going back to 2015, so you could compare it to give you some idea of what, you know, as we go through this year, how does that data compare to what's happened in the past?
Yeah, and that certainly does show sort of a curve that it was going, trending down, down, down until the pandemic hit, and then it seems to be moving up a bit, although what I've been reading is that there was a spike in crime during the pandemic, and that seems to have calmed down a bit, but maybe we just haven't seen that yet.
Well, I think two things are, yeah, you have seen nationally, there was a spike in crime during the pandemic, and that is flattening out, particularly violent crime in a lot of areas. And so we may see some of that here to some degree. And then kind of what you're seeing, if you look at the historical data, is I think a return to norm. You know, we bounce up to 2023 was 2008 cases, which if you look back is closer historically to the last decade. 2015, kind of 16 and 17, when there was kind of a peak for us. If I recall back, we actually don't have that in our database, but back around 2007 or 8 or 9 or something, there was another, if I recall, there was another kind of similar peak. I wasn't the supervising attorney then, but I just seem to recall we had a busier peak then. But I could probably give you a better answer on that, Rich, towards the end of the year when I see how this year plays out.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll look forward to it.
And then just quickly, because I know one issue you should be aware of that we're concerned about here is the closing of ADC, which I think people are probably aware of. That was so sudden. I mean, apparently it was so sudden. They were hiring counselors the week before they shut down. So they were hired for a week and then fired, which I was like, okay. But we're anticipating a disruption with our clients, you know, people in drug court, people, a lot of our clients, you know, we're representing, or we're trying to get them hooked into services, people on probation. Dan's department may see this. It's going to disrupt access to treatment services, so we're concerned about how that's going to, the fallout that's going to create in our system in terms of compliance on probation or, you know, getting into treatment, being successful at treatment with our clients in the legal system. Just to flag that for you.
Thank you for doing that. Dan, you had a comment or question?
I just wanted to echo Lance's concerns. I mean, we're at a point where we have an awful lot of people struggling with substance abuse and mental health issues. The need is extremely high. The danger is probably as high as it's ever been for overdose deaths. And we're down to one agency to use. I actually do have I just wanted to say I have a meeting with Erica Catraccia from the Cuba Addiction Recovery Services after this meeting to try to ascertain how we can make things as access to treatment as quick as possible for those individuals who need it.
Yeah.
We won't be, just to calm Lance's concerns, we won't be filing violations against people for not getting into treatment immediately if it's not accessible. Just we'll be wanting them to get in as soon as they can. So I think there's going to be a lot of triaging going on.
Okay. Yes, this is something I think we have to pay a lot of attention to. It's pretty scary what's going on there. Okay. Anything further for assigned counsel? Seeing none, thank you, Lance. And the only other item I think we have of substance is our public safety priorities for 2024. And I think we lost Shauna. Okay, you know, I'd suggest we save this because I know Shauna had an issue with one of the items pertaining to respite that I think we should have a conversation about. But what I would suggest in the meantime is, if any of the rest of you have issues with any of these proposed goals, let me know before the next meeting, and we'll put this as a priority to discuss then. Does that make sense? Okay. Anything further to come before the Public Safety Committee for our February meeting? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Veronica moves, Mike seconds. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.